that is one reason why people don't save. That's why you want to spend. So now everybody's thinking, oh, gee, I thought I was alone in spending. And no, you're not alone. I'm not saying you're right. I'm just saying you're not alone. So that's one of the issues that we have to deal with in financial education, how people really behave. Not just saying you should do and wagging your finger, but really building systems and educational tools that contemplate and speak to people where they are, humans being human. Let me give you another example. They talked to a few people. Well, they did some more research. I'm going to go up on stage here just so I can stand next to my slides. I promise not to sing. And what they did is they asked these people, what would you're in your workplace, and we're going to come to you and say, a week from now, we're going to come to you and offer you a snack. You get to pre-order that snack now. Would you like an apple or a candy bar? Most people will say, you know, I'll take the fruit. I'll take the apple. It's good for me, etc. So when you come back a week from now, I'll take the fruit. But here's what happens. When you ask people, when you come to them later and say, okay, here's your fruit. Here's your chance to change your decision. Do you want to change that decision? Most people now, they take the candy bar. So when we're thinking of our future selves, we're doing the right thing. We have the right aspirations. But when tomorrow becomes today, we do what we want. One thing I like to say is, you know what the most popular day to work out at the gym is? Tomorrow. So we put off these things. Again, how does this tie to money? Well, how can we make people do the right thing and make their plan, their budget, have meaning? Because when you're sitting down writing a budget, if you are writing a budget, you got the best of intentions. But those intentions fall away when the future becomes now. Here's one example of a financial literacy tool that was used to help people deal with that. They introduced, it's called the Save More Tomorrow program. They introduced it to some employers in the States. And you can pre-commit with your human resources department to have not just a certain amount of money go to your savings, your retirement, automatically, but it also takes a certain percentage of future raises. So you may get a 4% raise next year. Maybe you've said half of it, 2%, should go into your savings or your retirement or something like that. And it's enforced. It happens automatically. You never miss it because it doesn't hit your check in the first place. So that's an example of one of these interventions, one of these tools people can use that takes into account how we really are, how people really think and behave. I'll give you another example along these same lines. And the reason we are thinking about these things is because we can apply these findings in designing programs, offering defaults, and that's what that is. If you're having money do something without you engaging, it's because it's defaulting into that. Or drafting even regulations. One other example of this. They say that if we test you on a scale of 1 to 10 and say you're going to lose $5,000, or let's make it $50,000. You're going to lose it, however it happens. How do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? How bad do you feel? People will say maybe like 7 or 8. Then if we ask them, how would you feel if you gained that same amount of money? They'll only feel that positive up to like a 3 or a 4. Meaning we feel a loss more than we feel a gain, even if it's the same amount of money involved. So they call that loss aversion. What does that mean for financial literacy? Well, we have a program in the U.S., and there's programs all over the world like this, where we do things to help the poor. And we have a program where poor people can fill out some paperwork, which is not easy, but if they fill it out, they get thousands of US dollars back, which to anyone, particularly a poor family, is important, is a good amount of money. And they were trying to market it to them, and they were saying, look, you can bring this extra money into your household, so you should do this. And they had some success. But when they really had success is when they started saying, listen, every year you don't fill out this paperwork, you are losing this amount of money. This money is yours, it's on the table, somebody else is taking it away. And people responded much more fervently. They really followed up because nobody wants to lose. It's one thing not to gain. You can have it anyway. But if you're losing something that's really yours, you act. So again, that shows how some of these research things can be brought into financial literacy. Edutainment, I think we had a good example of the cartoon, something you're already doing. This doesn't have to be boring. I know, surprise. We have seen video games. We've worked with some of our clients on some of these issues. Getting across important financial literacy issues. Money-themed television programs, believe it or not. Contests, specialized lotteries, where every time you enter a lottery, every time you make a deposit to your bank or credit union, you are entered into a lottery to win a certain amount of money. So we're reinforcing a good behavior, you putting money away. So edutainment has potential. Robust program evaluation and research. As more money starts to find its way, government money, other funders say, we like this financial education idea. They want to see that the money they're investing is having a good impact. So we always say that these programs should have some sort of research, have some sort of results to find out if they're actually having an impact. So we think some is better than none. One way to do it is to say how many people came to our seminar, went to our website. That's pretty simple. You can also do a pre-test versus a post-test. Hopefully they knew more on the way out than on the way in. But what you're really looking for is not even a change in knowledge. That's nice, but you're looking for a change in behavior. Did people actually not just sit there and nod in a seminar, but did they go home, have a conversation with their spouse or whomever, and say, we need to save more, or we need to manage our credit card, or we need to get a budget, or we need to get our money into the formal economy and not have so much of it in the informal economy. Control groups are important. So in doing research, it's important to have a group that is not at all impacted by your program and compare them to those who are impacted by your program, and hopefully the other group is better than the control group. And using failures to achieve successes, looking to see what went wrong. When people put on programs, they're always interested in getting the feedback of the people who were there. I'm almost as curious about the feedback from the empty chairs. Why didn't those people come? What was wrong in our marketing that didn't drive them there in the first place? Instead of thinking there's something wrong with them, they're not showing up, thinking there's something wrong with us, we're not attracting them. Just shifting the burden. Workplace financial education, it's a very good place to reach adults. Usually when you're at the workplace, you're focused, you're dressed, usually caffeinated, and a couple of cups of coffee, you're ready to go. So employers find it's in their best interest to have financially literate employees. They're less stressed about bills and so forth, and they're more stable. So employers are good allies in doing financial education, especially for adults. Let's talk about a few basic truths of financial literacy. Trust is key. It's very important to realize that no one wants to deal with someone that they don't trust, especially on money issues. And we see this a lot with friends and family. You think about it, if you're faced with a difficult financial issue, if you don't know anybody who's some sort of licensed advisor, you will probably go to a family member or a friend. That person may not know a lot about money, they may not know any more than you, but you know they're not going to victimize you. They're not going to do anything intentionally wrong. You may get bad advice, but it wasn't intentional. That's what people do. I mean, we laugh, but that's what people do. It's almost as if if they're going to lose money, they'd rather lose it with a friend than go to some stranger and lose it that way. So it's important to have trust. Let me use an example to illustrate this. And the timekeeper could tell me about how much time do we have left. Keep me on his toes. Okay, we'll talk quickly. So there was we have a youth organization called Boy Scouts in the U.S. Maybe you have something similar here, where youth go out and learn different skills. And they were out on a hike, out in the forest. And one of the children got lost. And he got separated for days. And so what they did is the troop, the people sponsoring the hike, went to the local town, got a whole lot of people together. They all got flashlights and walked around, and then they all, strangers came in, and they handed out pictures of the kid, and these strangers were really good, and they walked around through the forest, yelling out this kid's name, trying to find him. They couldn't find him. Days go by. Eventually, somebody happens upon him, surprises him, and they find him, they bring him in. He was okay, he was cold and hungry, but otherwise he was okay. And they said, well, we didn't find you all that far from where you got lost. How did we miss you for all those days? And he said, well, two things. I relied on two pieces of knowledge when I was out there in the woods. I relied upon my training as a scout to know how to get food and water. I said, I also remember something my parents told me. My parents said that when you're lost, you should always avoid strangers at any cost, even if those strangers know your name. So this kid has been effectively avoiding capture for about 3 or 4 days. Good work. Now what has this got to do with money? We say, and rightfully we say, and some of the folks at this table and the people who work there probably say, be careful who you trust. Don't just give your money to anybody, because that's a good way to lose it. But at the same time, we say, don't give your money to a bank. Somebody you don't know, in a building not near your house, and it'll be okay. So how do we give those messages without mixing them up? Both of those messages are right. They're both accurate. Don't give your money to strangers, except when the stranger has some sort of regulatory approval that says their deposit is insured, etc. So it's a little fuzzier than that. So the goal when you're doing financial education is to not teach fear, like that little kid got, but to teach fact. The goal is a skeptical, but not a cynical consumer. We don't want them so turned off by financial services, so untrusting that the money's under the mattress, because that causes its own problems. So we have to be careful about that, and always remember the guidepost here is trust and how we achieve that. Lessons should be rooted in concepts. Nothing's going to put you to sleep faster than somebody showing you a lot of math. I'm sorry, for those of you who are math professors. And people around the world, their numeracy skills are not that great. But you know what? You can learn the majority of what you need to know about financial literacy without getting really into complicated numbers. Mostly it's concepts. What happens when interest rates go up? What happens when unemployment rate goes down? Just basic ideas like that. What limit do you have on your deposit insurance? What's a tax rate? Very basic stuff. So it's really more about vocabulary, and then only then should you get into numbers, because if you lead with the numbers, you'll have to chase people. Programs must be experienced, so if you are somebody who runs a program, it's easy to do this, and I know in the States it happens a lot. You can learn a great deal by leaving the office and observing your program in action. You can go through all the planning meetings and set people out there, but if you don't sneak in the back of the room someday and kind of just listen and pretend like you're a member of the audience, you won't learn what you really need to know. It's about getting your hands dirty, and this is my little bit of what I call fortune cookie wisdom. Never trust a gardener or an auto mechanic with clean hands. You got to get in there. You got to understand the program. Some tips, very quickly, is to think strategically. Sometimes you'll get people in a room and they say, okay, we're going to do financial literacy. You definitely see this in the early stages of a country getting involved in financial literacy. So it's important to think about this. It's important to brainstorm, to have crazy ideas, because one of them might actually work. But then eventually you have to focus. You have to know that most of your ideas aren't going to happen because there's not enough funding, not enough time, maybe it's not a great idea, etc. But you should still try to come up with a lot of ideas. But ultimately focus and incorporate metrics. So we have numbers to say, so we can tell 6 months from now, was this a good idea? Sometimes you don't know until you do it. Avoid the why don't we campaigns, right? Everybody sits around the table going, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? That's a good way to get the failure. More ideas doesn't necessarily mean more success. So ultimately, managing issues on financial programming is about choosing, having several ideas and just picking the best ones and going with that. Deploy technology, don't just use it. And I see this happening with a number of countries, and I think you all wisely understand this as you start to look at mobile banking, because that is a tool that has a lot of potential, but again, without financial literacy, it's going to be limited. So it's not just about having the right technology. You got to keep remembering the people part of this. So as I say, there's no attendance prize in cyberspace, the blogosphere, the Twitterverse, or YouTube. People sometimes say, well, we should be on YouTube. We should have a Twitter account. Why? If they can't answer that question, they probably shouldn't do it yet. I usually say be purposeful or be gone. So have a reason for doing it, and just the fact that other organizations are doing it, you want to keep up, yeah, that's not a reason. And sometimes organizations will say, well, we don't need to get in kind of social media, and they'll look around the room with the youngest person, boom, you're in charge. That doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert in how to communicate, because ultimately this is just another form of communication. Maybe somebody a little more senior knows how to communicate. They may not know what buttons to push on the phone or the computer, but that's easily learned. Brand selectively. Frequently your message should be your purpose, not your name. It's not important that people know the name of your organization. It's important because that comes later. It's important that they know what you do and what problem in their lives today that you can solve. It is a quest for relevancy. Let's say 6 months from now, I'm going to break my leg. Between now and then, I may meet wonderful doctors. I may be at cocktail parties and people say, I had my leg broken and this person was a great doctor. I'm not really taking that in because I don't know what's going to happen to me. But when the time comes, I'm going to wish I knew that. So people are walking around either having bankruptcy issues, they're having banking issues, they're having whatever. That's the message they need to get from you. They don't need to know, this is who we are, this is what our initials are, this is what they stand for, here's our hours of operation, here's where we're located. They don't care. And usually the way I put it is, if I don't know my problem as a consumer, I can't recognize your solution. So your advertising should be losing sleep because you can't pay your bills, have no safe place to put your money. That's the hook. That gets them. Then they start to learn what you do. But it's really a quest for relevancy. We really have to presume, that's what I say, presume audience indifference. Presume people don't care. Because they start off not caring. Sorry, that's where they start off. So what you have to do is put yourself in their shoes and find them where they are. And realize that you're competing with everything else in their life, which is a lot. It can be done, but it takes work. And what you know to be true, they don't yet. So sometimes it's odd, but you have to prove 2 + 2 = 4 because they don't live in your world. They don't know how important deposit insurance is. It just doesn't occur to them. They're busy living their lives. So some of these things have to be explained, and that's why I'm glad Ms. McCain referred to the former president of the U.S., how he actually taught. He was kind of an educator. The public what deposit insurance is for. Finally, the big picture. Who's in it? Policymakers, regulators, who's going to get this done? It's not just going to be the folks at the head table here. They're going to need you and people outside of this room. It's going to be policymakers, regulators, researchers who came up with all that interesting research that I cited. I didn't do that, some folks in universities did. NGOs, civil society, financial literacy practitioners, some of you are that, some of you may become that. Schools, teachers, we've got some financial services firms have an important role to play to help. Parents and students, we've got some students here. I'm sure parents as well. So you all have your own roles, but understand that you are all part of a community, or at least you need to become that. If you have a room full of soloists, that's great, but you don't make music until you are put together as a symphony. So that's what you need to try to do. So who's in the big picture? You. Finally, let me conclude by addressing why this all matters. What's it about? I would offer that what it's about is not just about money. It's bigger than that. And in all your efforts, make sure you keep them people-focused, keep them consumer-centric. Ultimately, what we're doing is not about debits and credits, about money and finance. It's not even about wealth or poverty. Rather, it's about people and families. It's about their anxieties and their frustrations. It's even about their hopes and dreams. Our goal with financial inclusion, financial capability, should be to replace their financial fear with economic security. We can really, through financial literacy, help people live lives of choice instead of lives of chance. And that's very important. That's what it's about. And through your efforts in financial inclusion, that's what you're about. So I want to thank you for including me in this effort and wish you the best of luck as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ian Okoda, for that entertaining and informative presentation. We'd like to welcome you once again to Jamaica, sir, and please do not feel like a stranger. Another hand for Mr. Ian Okoda, please. And now to talk to us about banking the unbanked in Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Maurice McNaught.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I believe all appropriate protocol has been observed, although I do recognize my colleagues, distinguished colleagues at the head table. Let me add my own congratulations to the JDIC for staging, for convening what is a really important forum, and indeed must record my own appreciation for being invited to join a distinguished list of presenters, and it indeed is a privilege to do so. I think it has been said a couple of times by prior speakers, but it is worth reiterating. Intuition, a whole range of socioeconomic theories and empirical evidence suggests that there are three of the critical pillars that drive growth and economic development in any society are access to education, access to finance, and access to information. And I think the JDIC has in one fell swoop, in their theme promoting financial inclusion through public education and awareness, you've captured the essence and the principle of all three. What I hope to do in my brief 15 minutes is share with you some perspective from some research that we did last year looking at financial exclusion, or what is often termed the unbanked. And it was not research that we did in isolation, but it was research that was part of a broader study that looked at the prospects of introducing mobile financial services and the conditions that would make that most effective. And we thought it was very important to understand not only quantitatively the unbanked or the degree of financial exclusion, but also the character of the unbanked. And so I want to share with you some perspective from that and talk a little bit about some of the prospects for the introduction of mobile financial services as a means of accelerating the rate of financial inclusion. So, the unbanked, and you've had several definitions. I like this very concise expression. An individual who does not have access to affordable, convenient, secure financial services. So that it is not simply a matter of people who have a bank account, but have access to financial services that are affordable and convenient and secure. And by CGAP count, well, 2009 is maybe a little dated, but there are 2.7 billion such people worldwide. But you know, the interesting question that we examined when we looked at this research is, you know, there's a lot of discussion about financial inclusion being a good thing, a socially good thing. But for us, I mean, looking beyond the social responsibility, financial inclusion is it financially makes sense. In other words, the currently financially excluded potential consumers are a legitimate, sustainable opportunity for growth, both at the macroeconomic level and for private entities, whether it's banks or other entities that are looking at opportunities to target that constituency. So it's not just something that is right to do, but it makes business sense. And in fact, the microfinance industry has demonstrated in some respects that the extreme poor are extremely bankable. Those of you who understand microfinance and understand the kind of rates that they're required to work with would appreciate that idea. So for us, it was important to understand you know, the nature of the unbanked, not only quantitatively but qualitatively. Why have they stayed out of the formal financial sector? And also, how are they distributed? Because, we like to think of our markets in Jamaica, we always refer to it as a small market, but it is not by any means homogeneous. So that understanding distribution is also quite important. And these are brief summary of some of the findings from that piece of research. So that, this was based on a nationally representative survey. So it is representative. And our findings were that the unbanked, as it is classically defined, is about 34% of the adult population. About 34% of the adult population in Jamaica does not have access to the formal banking sector. And that's not a bad number. That's not a bad number for a developing economy. But it's a deceptive number. The other thing that was interesting for us from this study is, do I have a pointer on this? Does it have a pointer? Yeah, the other thing that was interesting is, the other thing that was interesting from this is that of the so-called 66% that we would classify as being banked, right? They have presence in the formal financial sector. A large percentage of those only have standard savings accounts. They do not have access to transactional accounts. In fact, only roughly 14% of those have access to transactional accounts. That means accounts that they can do commerce. So while 65% or so persons have a presence in the banking sector, actually only a small number, 14% roughly, have access to transactional accounts. For me, that's really interesting because traditionally we look at financial inclusion as people who have access to the formal banking sector and are able to accumulate savings. But a significant number, in fact, we're talking about 88% of the Jamaican adult population do not have access to convenient transactional accounts in the banking sector.